I ate alone then, now they beg for a seat at my table. The true measure of solitude isn't the number of people absent from your life, it's the number of times you eat a celebratory meal completely alone. I'm Leo, 39, and for years, my table was empty, my success invisible. I ate alone then, now they beg for a seat at my table. The empty seat and the bitter meal. For nearly 2 decades, my life was a relentless cycle of work, failure, and quiet, persistent dismissal. My ambition wasn't in law or medicine, it was in sustainable agriculture technology, specifically, designing closed-loop, vertical farming systems that could operate with minimal water in arid environments. This required massive faith, constant fundraising, and enduring skepticism. My family, the Hayes clan, was old money, defined by traditional, predictable success in real estate. My father, Richard, 68, and my brother, Ethan, 42, managed the family portfolio, and they viewed my passion project, TerraNova, as an embarrassing, money-sucking liability. I was the family disappointment, the one who refused the guaranteed path. Dinner table conversations always revolved around Ethan's latest acquisition or Richard's quarterly returns. When the topic drifted to me, the air would tighten with silent judgment. Still playing in the dirt, Leo? Richard would ask, not as a question, but as a pronouncement of my immaturity. When are you going to stop draining your trust fund and contribute to the real world? The dismissal wasn't just verbal, it was physical. I remember working 7 days a week to secure the first crucial patent for TerraNova. When I finally succeeded, I bought a small, expensive cake to celebrate. I took it home, hoping for a tiny gesture of recognition. Richard and Ethan were watching a football game. When I showed them the paperwork, Ethan glanced at it, shrugged, and said, "Looks good. Just don't track mud into the foyer." I ate that cake alone in the kitchen, the frosting tasting like ash, the heavy silence of the house pressing down on me. I realized that my entire existence was irrelevant to them unless it generated status or immediate profit according to their narrow metrics. My worth was conditional, and my dream was a zero-sum game they were convinced I would lose. The crueler judgment came from my cousin, Camilla, 40, my childhood best friend. She saw my struggle and chose the winning side. She'd often call, supposedly for support, but every conversation ended with her gently steering me toward failure. "Maybe you should just take that job at the bank, Leo. You're so stressed. It's okay to let go of the fantasy." Her pity was sharper than my father's scorn. She wasn't malicious, she was simply uncomfortable with my risk, and that discomfort translated into a subtle form of sabotage. I left home shortly after, not in a storm of anger, but in a quiet, absolute exodus. I packed my prototypes, my research, and the memory of that solitary cake. I made a solemn vow. The next time I celebrated, I would not be alone, and they would not be invited. If your family constantly belittled your dreams, forcing you to eat alone while celebrating their own mediocre successes, would you ever consider forgiving them later? The next 5 years were a masterclass in isolation and relentless grinding. I moved into a shared industrial space, sleeping on a cot next to my first operational prototype. TerraNova became my world, my revenge, and my only companion. I lived on instant noodles and the burning memory of being called a drain. I had to be resourceful, teaching myself coding, engineering, and advanced materials science, all while constantly scraping for angel investment. The pressure was intense, but I thrived on the silence. Every successful harvest, every data point proving my system's efficiency, was a victory against the judgment of the Hayes men. My break came with a massive drought that decimated traditional farms. TerraNova's closed-loop system, which required less than 5% of the water of traditional farming, became an emergency solution overnight. Suddenly, my toys were a critical, disruptive technology. The investment flowed in, massive and sudden. I secured a Series C funding round that valued TerraNova at nearly $1 billion. I went from the guy who couldn't secure a single supportive voice to the industry leader whose name commanded international attention. The ascension was complete. I didn't reach out to my family. I changed my contact details and moved into an anonymous, high-security penthouse. I wanted the reveal to be entirely public, undeniable, and utterly humiliating for them. The shift happened when the Financial Times ran a feature profiling the future of global food security, featuring a full-page photo of me in front of one of my massive, glowing vertical farms. The headline, visible even from a distance, was clear: Leo Hayes, the billion-dollar visionary who quietly solved the water crisis. My family saw the name, the face, and the 9-figure valuation, and their carefully constructed reality shattered. The calls started immediately, a frantic, nauseating chorus of forced affection. Ethan called first, his voice slick and oily. He didn't ask how I was. He immediately launched into a proposal for a mutually beneficial partnership, suggesting TerraNova could acquire one of the Hayes' struggling industrial properties at an inflated price. He didn't see his brother, he saw a liquidity event. Richard's voicemail was the most painful. He cried, real, audible sobs, but not out of paternal remorse. He was crying because Ethan had recently made a massive, catastrophic investment blunder that was threatening the entire Hayes portfolio. He was facing professional and social ruin. "We need you, Leo," he gasped into the phone, suddenly appealing to a family bond he had spent 20 years denying. "You are the only one who can save us. You are my brilliant son. My brilliant son." The words were a bitter victory. I wasn't brilliant when I was struggling and alone. I was only brilliant now that the Hayes name needed the glow of my success to survive. Even Camilla reached out. She sent a lengthy, overawed text message about how she had always been so proud, claiming she was just protecting me when she suggested I quit. She asked if she could be the first to feature my story in her new, struggling podcast. She wasn't seeking connection, she was seeking professional validation from my halo effect. I didn't answer their calls. Instead, I organized a highly exclusive, private dinner. This wasn't a family reunion, It was a curated event for TerraNova's successful investors and my closest collaborators, the people who had shared the journey, the risk, and the ramen. The venue was the city's most prestigious, inaccessible rooftop restaurant, The Summit. The reservation was only for 16 people. I sent a single, elegant, engraved invitation to my parents and Ethan. They confirmed immediately, of course. They saw an invitation to reclaim their status, to sit at the table of their successful son. They saw a lifeline. On the night of the dinner, I arrived early. The atmosphere was exactly what I had always dreamed of: warm, collaborative, and successful. My collaborators were joyful, my investors were proud. The long, magnificent table was set with pristine silverware, fine china, and an abundance of fresh flowers. Richard, Eleanor, and Ethan arrived exactly on time, dressed in their finest clothes, their expressions a desperate blend of anxiety and forced cheer. They looked around, searching for the table. They saw the beautiful, long centerpiece, the full room, and the air of undeniable victory. Then they saw the seating chart. I had reserved one single, small, round table for them, tucked away in the farthest, darkest corner of the room, right next to the service entrance. The table was set for 3. There were no flowers, no lavish centerpiece, only the bare minimum, a stark contrast to the main table. The main table, where I sat at the head, surrounded by my true collaborators, had 16 seats. I approached them, smiling the calm, professional smile of a CEO closing a major deal. Richard started to protest, his face paling as he understood the subtle, public humiliation. Ethan muttered about an error in the seating. No error, father, I said, my voice quiet but utterly firm. The main table is reserved for the people who believed in TerraNova when it was just an idea. For the people who shared the risk. For the people who shared the struggle. I paused, looking at the small, lonely table. That table, I continued, gesturing to their isolated corner, is set for the 3 of you. It's the only space available. You will be seated there, where you can observe, but not participate. Eleanor looked devastated, realizing the social consequence of being exiled to the shame table while their estranged son held court. Richard's face was a mask of cold fury and desperate vulnerability. You will eat your meal there, I finished, the quiet triumph finally ringing in my voice, and you will observe what a real celebration looks like. Consider it a business meeting. This is a dinner, not a reunion. I watched them take their seats, Richard stiffly, Eleanor tearfully, Ethan with defeated fury. They were forced to sit in the isolation I had once endured, watching the spectacle of the success they actively denied. The meal was magnificent. The conversation at the main table was vibrant, filled with laughter and mutual respect. For the first time, I didn't have to eat alone. I looked down the long, beautiful table at the faces of the people who respected me for my vision, not my lineage. I glanced over at the corner. They sat in absolute silence, watching us. They had begged for a seat at my table, and I had given them exactly what they deserved, a view of the victory they had forfeited. The bitterness was gone. All that remained was the quiet, profound satisfaction of a debt finally paid. What would you do? Once you reach the absolute pinnacle of success, would you maintain the professional distance, or would you finally forgive the family who denied you everything? I want to know what you think. Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.